Hey everyone, welcome to the Jamilia Greer Show, where we explore the future of tech with people building it. And today we're diving into one of the most critical and misunderstood topics in Web3, digital identity. Who controls it? Why does it matter? And how do we make it secure, private, and actually user friendly? To unpack all of this, I'm thrilled to be joined by Evin McMullen, co founder and chief strategy officer of Privado ID. Privado ID is a company redefining how identity works across blockchains and traditional systems. Evan's a pioneer in this space. She's founded companies like Disco, XYZ, advised organizations like the Boys Club, and has really put in an effort to bring diversity to the front of tech and has led initiatives at Consensus and even Berkshire Hathaway. Evin, welcome to the show.
Jamilia, thank you so much for having me today. Really excited to dig into this discussion.
Yes, I am too. And I'm also a privacy nerd, so I think we're going to have a great time.
You know, we love to talk about things like consent and control in this house. And so privacy as a side effect of those choices in that agency is always in style.
For sure. So, Evan, let's start with the basics. So, like when you talk about terms like self sovereign identity, most people who even listen or watch this show, their minds are kind of like blown like, okay, what exactly does that mean? And what does it mean for like people, like everyday people? How would you kind of introduce that topic to an average person?
Well, I certainly wouldn't start off with the word salad of the phrase self-sovereignty, which can be quite a mouthful. And as you noted, doesn't really mean a whole lot to most people in their everyday lives. I would describe a self-sovereign identity system as one in which the people who data is written about, or the people about whom data is created, those people should have the most control over the data that's written about them. It's a pretty simple concept, right? You should be in the driver's seat when it comes to the data and the value that you create that is written about you. And it's pretty weird right now that all of that information gets sliced off and stored in separate applications, separate servers controlled by separate companies, like little broken shards, pieces of yourself that you leave behind that you can't reassemble, that you have to ask for permission to even access or look at. And so from a storage perspective, it's pretty expensive paying for rent for all these little pieces of data in all these different places, all these different companies, but also from a control and usability perspective. What if you want to use that data again? What if you don't want to have to fill out a form every time you go to a new website or sign up for a new app? You've already told the internet that you are a person today through your actions, through the data that you've shared. Why on earth are you filling out another CAPTCHA? And so that's how I approach self-sovereign identity, a system in which the subject of information has the most control over it. Not ultimate control, not the ability to rewrite the contents of their bank account and arbitrarily make up an amount, but rather that party is in the driver's seat, that they have more control than others about how that data gets seen, who gets to use it, and how it gets shared.
So basically, data about anyone, right, that's out there, it's about you, but you don't own it, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. It's like, it's about you, but you don't own it. And the big boys own it, as we like to say. The the megacorps are owning it right now. And so I think to your point, like most people are trading personal data for convenience, right? Like think of social logins. I am the worst of this because I hate writing down passwords and memorizing passwords. I'm the one that always goes for authenticate with Google, right? I know it's wrong. I know that they are reading my emails, right? So let's talk about that because most people think like, "Oh, it's easy for me. This is easier for me." What would you say to those people?
Which is a reasonable thing to think. Human beings do not wake up in the morning with dreams of logging in. The reason that you're choosing Google Login is because it's the thing that gets you to the thing that you're really trying to do, right? There is an objective, an experience, a task that you're trying to accomplish. And you, Jamilia, normal human being, are just trying to do so in the most efficient and logical way to you that feels good, that feels safe, that feels familiar. I am willing to bet that, 90 steps of switching RPCs and multiple wallets and multiple addresses and on-chain and off-chain data, that might even be more complicated, more confusing to the average person than, a more familiar login setup. And that's why it is incumbent upon us as builders, people like myself, my team with Billions Network and Privado ID, to build experiences that feel safe and familiar and comfortable, that take the guesswork out of building things the right way and simply serve an experience that does the thing. And so when we talk about the complexity of managing data in a secure way, I would cut yourself some slack. There is no right or wrong way to use products in the era of the internet where these spaces are evolving, when you're using your best judgment and trying to do what's right for you. I think it is not an indictment on the responsibility of individuals as much as it is a call to action for developers and creators to build systems that have different types of incentives. So you can enjoy value in the same way. You can have great login authentication experiences that feel seamless, and you don't have to have a PhD to be able to participate.
That's key, right? Because no one wants to get a PhD in data sovereignty or or data privacy at this point. Um, Evan, one thing I'm wondering. So you talked about Privado ID and also Billions Network. How is Privado ID first of all attacking this problem, right? Because you do have the everyday person who's not thinking about this. What are some of the things that Privado ID is doing right now to attack this issue?
So you can think about Privado ID kind of in the same way that you think about TCP/IP or HTTPS. These are protocol layer technical tools that help our computers talk to each other in a secure way, sharing the correct data so that we can see and interact in the way that we wish. But they're not necessarily interfaces or websites that we look at that we're familiar with every day. So under the hood, Privado ID enables what we call unified identity, the ability to prove certain traits about yourself in one environment and reuse that data over and over again across multiple devices, multiple blockchains, even multiple institutions. So today, our team are stewards of the most widely used privacy preserving, what are called zero knowledge code libraries on Earth, with over 9,000 projects relying on these tools to be able to keep your data secure and safe while still allowing you to have awesome experiences in a way that's not going to be super interruptive to you. So it feels pretty seamless, but this technology supports partners from TikTok Research to HSBC and everybody in between. The way that we're thinking about, tackling this on a human level, of course, this is where the B comes in, is Billions.network. Billions.network is the first universal human and AI network built with mobile first verification. What that means is that you can prove who you are, how old you are, the fact that you're a person and not a bot, where you live, your, status for things like KYC from the safety of your phone, where none of that information gets exposed and written into someone else's database. You're not giving it up, handing over copies of it like you do every time you fill out a form on a new website, but instead, you're able to use your everyday regular phone that you already have in your pocket to prove all these traits about yourself without revealing any of the underlying information. So this new superpower, allowing individual human beings to prove who they are on the internet in a private and anonymous way, also paves the way for being able to bring that level of security and identity and safety to AI agents as well. So I'll put a pin in that for a second because we covered a lot of ground. Jamilia, what questions do you have for me?
I'm just thinking about the everyday person who, has a conversation or shares a text message with someone, with a loved one, and then they jump on Instagram and they're scrolling and they see an ad for the item that they just discussed, or they're talking in front of their Alexa, and then the next thing they know, they're on some other device, and they see another ad, right? And they say, "Oh, that's a coincidence. How did they know, right? How did they know that I was looking for that?" And I think most people don't, like, when you talk about protecting one's digital identity, and allowing them to operate with like the systems that we use every day, but not revealing all of that background information that these companies don't need to know. I don't think the average person really understands how much data about you is collected in one occurrence, in one interaction of what you do. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Oh, certainly. When we walk through the world, whether physically or digitally, we leave behind us little breadcrumbs of the fact that we were present. And any one of these pieces of information by itself, a receipt, a parking ticket, a takeout order, your location as you walk from one place to another, any one of these pieces of information by itself is not particularly useful. But when you assemble all of that data together, when you bring together unique aspects of what makes you you and then share that with another party, that can start to get a little weird. So one example of this is that the company 23andMe currently is in the process of basically, no longer being a going concern. They have a database of the DNA of millions of people, I believe, at this point. And that database, maybe hundreds of thousands, but either way, that database of DNA will then be put up for auction to the highest bidder. And so we may be going through the world thinking that we're interacting with services in a clear and straightforward manner, such as getting our DNA tested so we can learn more about our genetic makeup. But we probably didn't expect that data would be sold to the highest bidder out of our control. So there are some strange and unintended consequences when we entrust parties that are not necessarily regulated in the way that we might expect, or that are fledgling, that are developing in their own practice, when we share some of our most sensitive information with them. Now, everybody makes mistakes, certainly true at the government level as well. And so there are actually over 1 billion people on Earth today whose sensitive and private data has been exposed through failures of technology at enterprise and government levels. So what this means now is that we are aware of the risk surfaces of how this can happen. And again, more homework for us, the builders, to create systems that do not replicate these known vulnerabilities that can cause so much harm.
I think when a lot of people think about this issue of data privacy and then just your digital identity being under attack, really, it's pretty vulnerable. Then we talk about blockchain, and then we talk about AI agents. And I think there is this fear or a persistent myth that everything, technology is going to take over the world, right? And I know it sounds crazy, but many people believe that we are on a slippery slope where you'll have to scan your eyeball to buy groceries, and the government will know everything that you do, and AI agents will control the world. So taking that, okay, that's a very, like, on the spectrum, it's a very radical viewpoint. But when you talk about using AI agents to solve this, how would you reassure someone who has, I mean, maybe there is no reassurance for that type of person, but how would you reassure someone who's maybe in the middle of the spectrum about the role of AI agents in protecting digital identity?
Well, I can start off by promising you that the future of technology is not some bro in Silicon Valley collecting body parts in a database. So say goodbye to your eyeball cabal fears. That's not it. Now, beyond
Sorry.
that, what else I would say to this individual is that right now they're probably experiencing, what some people call the dead internet. Right now, internet traffic is comprised about 50% of bot traffic. That means that when you go online, it's often difficult to tell whether you're interacting with a real human being on the other side. whether the reply to your tweet actually came from a person or whether that was a bot. And so with 50% of online traffic coming from bots and no method yet, before our team introduced it, no method to be able to identify those bots, to determine where they came from, who controls them, how were they trained. Basically, there is no way today online to ask a bot, take me to your leader. Who's your daddy? And so without that accountability mechanism, right, there is no way to have persistent consequences for when bots do bad things. So at our team, we asked the question, what happens when bots do bad things? And we landed on the answer that accountability requires identity. So we introduced the deep trust framework, which is a way for a human being who first identifies themselves uniquely using their mobile device, doing something like tapping their passport to their phone in one quick movement, but maintaining security and safety of that data. It allows them to create a unique identity for an instance of an AI agent and to relate it back to themselves, kind of like putting a leash on your dog, putting a label on your AI agent, proving that it is accountable to you. So that when your AI agent goes out to the big bad internet to do actions on your behalf, it can prove that it belongs to Jamilia, that it is qualified to be in the spaces where you are qualified to be. It is permitted to act on your behalf within certain rules, and that when it violates those rules, it'll get shut off. Now, without the ability to relate or identify an agent, which really is about developer and business identity, then we have no mechanism to hold bots accountable for doing those bad things. And even in the instance of, of benevolent AI agents and, and the desire to do positive or effective things, we still need agents to be able to recognize each other, right? How does my bot talk to your bot and recognize that they're our bots? And so whether we're discussing a swarm of AI agents that we want to make sure are coordinating with each other instead of competing or being antagonistic to each other, or whether it's being able to confer permission or even to hold accountable people behind those agents, we need these systems of identity in place.
So I wake up tomorrow morning and I create a bot and I tell my bot, you're going to go on Twitter and you're going to, X, excuse me, you're going to go on X and you're going to, just start posting whatever you want. I know there was a story about someone that created an AI agent to basically pump up a coin, right? It made millions, pump up a token. So let's say I train my bot to do that and it does it. And then it rug pulls and sends me the money. So basically you're saying that if I do this, right, I created my AI agent to do this. And I've used the digital identity to confirm that I'm the owner. I'm the one that created this AI agent. That can be traced back to me. And then I guess putting on the lawyer's hat, because I'm always thinking about what are the legal consequences of something like this? Who can be held liable? I think we probably have some evidence to go ahead and pursue legal action against bad actors that use AI agents to do bad things.
I think that is entirely the point, because in the absence of this mechanism that I just described, there are exactly zero methods of clear recourse. In fact, let's talk about the legal framework for a hot second. I'm sure you've probably seen before in airports things. There's this airline, I believe it is called Air Canada, and they're just a regular airline that help people get from place to place, and they're pretty adept in exploring new technologies. And so earlier, I believe it was last year, they incorporated ChatGPT as like a kind of like a chatbot in their homepage to help travelers be able to discover new fares and ask questions about their tickets. Now, that chatbot was actually just a ChatGPT wrapper. So they basically rebranded a large language model and experience that that came from another company. And so that means that they didn't develop it in-house. They didn't train it. They may have fine-tuned it a little to teach it a little extra about airfares. But what actually ended up happening was that there was a passenger who spoke to that chatbot, chatted with it, through their keyboard on the homepage of the Air Canada website, and was offered an airplane ticket that didn't exist. So the chatbot that LLM, large language model, just started making up plane tickets. And so, of course, that passenger expected that airplane fare to be honored by the business whose website produced it. Then Air Canada said, whoa, 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 that's not our bot. We did not make that, although it was on our website. We should not be held responsible for this. And so what actually happened was that Air Canada was, in fact, held responsible. They needed to uphold and honor the commitments that were made by that LLM, even though it was not created inside of their business. So what this highlights here, to call back from my Berkshire Hathaway insurance nerd days, is that there is no way to separate out risk management and to price it with insurance products for businesses that are using large language models. So when we bring AI into our business spaces, we also have to think about how are we going to quantify and manage the risk associated with representing our business, doing our business using this tool. And how can we ensure that when there do not exist standard insurance products for utilization of things like AI?
You talked about risk management, and it's funny, these days I've been thinking about the Web3 industry and risk management because it's gone through so many changes. And I'm wondering, your thoughts from this perspective that, you have this tool that's connected to having accountability for owners of AI agents, and then also, the digital identity piece. What are your thoughts on risk management generally? When you look at the Web3 space and you look at the new people who have come into it, the people who sometimes don't have much business background, they are sometimes not as seasoned as people who've worked in corporate, right? People who have just gotten into money really quickly or were sitting around tinkering and built something, and then all of a sudden they have $5 million to spend. Yeah, shots fired. What what are your thoughts on risk management in the space today?
So I first want to pause and say, what a great privilege we have as builders in this industry that the usership of this technology has grown so diverse, so broad ranging, that it is no longer fully occupied by people who share the same set of experiences, the same set of assumptions, the same philosophies, the same beliefs about, what the right way to build things are. And so these challenges to the status quo, people using this technology in unexpected, unique ways, different ways that perhaps are more focused on capital than they are on consensus. I think this is a natural evolution of emergent technology. And in terms of risk management, I think we could all do a little bit better in terms of wallet hygiene. But I think risk management in the crypto space is in its infancy. We are just starting to develop best practices around how to keep ourselves and our businesses safe. So, for example, whether that is a practice of rotating keys on wallets, or whether that is a practice of double checking the addresses that you send value to from your wallet, or whether that is validating the fact that the person you're talking to on Twitter is indeed really a reporter and the link you're going to click will really take you to a safe interview and not to drain your wallet. So overall, I think risk management in Web3 is a new muscle that we need to exercise, that we need to practice working out so that we can develop even better practices. From a development perspective, for example, the concept of auditing, the sort of safety check that you go through as a builder before you deploy your code or your application, that safety check usually, focuses only on smart contracts, only on a portion of the code and not the whole code, like the front end, the part that you see, or the libraries that you're depending on from other teams. So I think we are, as an industry, developing better and better practices, but there is a lot to be desired there.
Look, if risk management is a muscle that needs to be developed, then Web3 better get in the gym tomorrow, and including with diversity as
Exactly.
well. Diversity as well. And I wanted to talk about your work in diversity in Web3 because you've advised Boys Club for years, helping women and non binary folks break into tech. And we always have this conversation, right? Women in Web3, how are we doing? What's happening? I'll tell you my take. I would like to see more. I'd like to see more underrepresented persons in the space, and I'd like to see them doing more. And I'd like to see people stop asking for permission to sit at the table and just build your own table. That's kind of my take. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a lot of stuff too. My background going from corporate and banking and finance and a whole host of other industries, and then moving into this space, I was like, well, damn, where's all the women at? And it is kind of jarring, right? What are your thoughts on where we are in that? I'd love to hear your take.
So I feel very fortunate in that I never got the memo that Web3 wasn't for me or for people who have my experiences or who look or think like me. When I was first introduced to decentralized technologies over a decade ago, at this point, I was, in the classroom of a young woman who was my computer science professor. And so my point of entry to this technology was actually through a young woman. um, and then in the years since, I've had the wonderful experience of working on teams with many different shapes and sizes, lots of different, backgrounds and contexts, diversity, not only of how we present ourselves and how we identify, but also of our, intellectual viewpoints, our technical expertise and opinions, our cultural backgrounds and experiences, educational experiences. Um, and so I often find that um, when I'm given the opportunity, for example, to go guest teach a class at a university, or to help a group of folks, get started with their very first wallet, when I have the time and ability, I will always jump at that chance because, not so long ago, someone else did that for me. And that's why you and I are able to have this conversation today. So, I can want things at scale for the ecosystem, but I find that my best use of energy in those desires is to try to, be that resource for other people too.
I think that's so important, being that resource for other people, because a lot of times you can get caught up in your own stuff, right? I mean, you're building, you're watching progress, you're needed for strategy and for other advisory pieces. And it's so easy to get caught in the build mode that sometimes you forget to kind of look back and to help others. And so, for those that are listening to this and watching this, what would be your sort of advice to them if they're like, look at them, they've made it, she's worked at Berkshire Hathaway, and she was a lawyer at whatever company, etc. What would you say to them?
Blockchains are a multiplayer game. You cannot have a blockchain by yourself. That is a database. And so if we take the functional requirements of the technology at their most literal, we are together coordinating human beings in groups around this technology. And so therefore, I think one of the most effective ways to engage and to grow and to build your skills in this ecosystem is to do it together. Whether that is a close friend, a collaborator who you like to go to hackathons with, whether virtually or in person, whether that is a group of folks who you've met through discovery of this technology, such as SheFi or Boys Club, which are both global organizations of women and non-binary people at the frontier of technology. Or whether that is a new group that you have yet to meet, such as organizations that are built around specific protocols or projects that gather in places like Discord or X. So my guidance would be find a buddy, because Web3 is best enjoyed with friends.
That's amazing. Certainly something that people need to hear, and people need to be encouraged that Web3 is not a one-player game. And I like that joke you said. You said if it's one person, it's just a database. That was a pretty nerdy joke. I have to call you on that. That was almost a dad joke. Um, but I wanted to kind of talk to. I'm on TikTok a lot. I'm on social media. I talk to all different types of people from, like you mentioned, like the different backgrounds that people come from. Some people are coming from, universities. Some people have never stepped foot in a university. Some people have grad degrees. Some people, just are not really tech savvy. And I have to always go back to this whole user experience piece, meaning that, Web3, its value is there. And we know that it's going to solve a lot of problems, as you mentioned, digital identity with Privado ID. And then, just there's so many issues that blockchain, not even Web3, but just blockchain technology itself can solve. And a lot of the work that you do is on the back end. Do you think there's still a user experience problem, like a disconnect between the everyday person and the things that we talk about in terms of blockchain? And how do we close that gap?
If it takes more than 2 clicks, yes, it is way too complicated. I think that, for anyone who's ever interacted with applications and web apps and services like that that are based on blockchain technology, you can see and feel the ways in which that experience is a little tougher, a little more complicated than what might feel otherwise like a reflex, things like opening your phone or sending a text message to your mom. That is also part of why our team built out Billions.Network to allow you an easy and simple experience on your phone, or you can do things like take your passport, tap it to your phone, and immediately prove how old you are to a website without having to reveal any of your actual personal information. Experiences like this, I think, are best served when there is a specific goal in mind, when we are building this technology in service of a task that people are trying to do, such as enter websites or to be able to interact with certain financial products or to make purchases or discover new opportunities or resources in a way that they can't right now. And so, unless your technology is solving an explicit problem for a specific person and you need to improve that experience, then you are just building technology for technology's sake. Then it's like a science fair. Then your code is like a sculpture, a beautiful art object without any utility. So I think, the constant reminder that we as builders have is to practice empathy. And that's really what product development is. It is just an exercise in the embodiment of empathy.
That's music to my ears because I've I've worked with some projects, and you're trying to get, so the type of work that I do, for example, in trying to get people who follow me on social media, etc., to come on and to come into Web3 and to really understand, number one, what it is, but to onboard them into different projects. And people get to adding their email, verifying their email, and then they're hit with 10 fields. What country you live in, what's your favorite ice cream, no one wants to go through that. And so, yeah, I'm totally with you. This whole idea about, I think you called it empathy, user product design in an empathetic way, to understand that people don't want to do all that. And people do not want to be changing from this network or that network on one. People don't even know what it means to change from one network to another with one wallet. And I think that's something that the space definitely needs to move towards.
Certainly, you and I have had a wonderful conversation thus far, and not once have we discussed the fact that the TCP/IP feels extra crispy today. The role of underlying technical protocols should be most frequently, I believe, basically invisible to the user and the experience that they're having on their screen. What they're clicking, what they're trying to do, does not necessarily require the user to or you and I to understand every single inner working of our computers and the way that the networks and infrastructure that they're built on are allowing us to have this discussion. Now, for those who are interested, I think it's wonderful that there's ample information, guidance for us to learn and explore, but that should not be a prerequisite to having a conversation.
Certainly not. And I hope in the future, across of the next 5 years or so, that we see some progress in that. And, I'd like to know, Evan, from your standpoint, where do you see digital identity in, let's say, 5 years, 2030? I can't believe I'm saying 2030 is in 5 years. That's crazy. Are we headed towards seamless interoperability, as they say? Or are we going to keep having these fragmented pieces, as you mentioned earlier?
So, Jamilia, here's a promise that I will make to you. In 5 years, you will never fill out a form again. You will never fill out a CAPTCHA again. You will never need to re-enter basic information about your age to any website or application that has decided to use modern practices. And that is going to save people here where I am in the United States tens of millions of hours every single year.
That's a huge promise. And I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to that. And I think people, it is a process for people to embrace this new way of living. People who had to learn how to go from writing. I don't know if you've ever written a letter and put it in the post box with a stamp. I did that when I was little. And then there was this transition towards email. And then it was like, just text it, right? And now it's like, just snap it. People you gotta evolve, people. And if this is where we're headed, you gotta get on the train. That's kind of how I feel.
I completely agree. And, I'm going to out myself here. I am old enough not only to have written letters in cursive, but to have had a stamp collection when I was a little kid. And so I completely understand and appreciate the funny experience of evolving the form in which we interact. Now, the nice thing is that I'm pretty sure invisible infrastructure and one-click app experiences are going to be a lot easier for me to enjoy than learning cursive in the third grade and collecting and pulling stamps off of envelopes were for me in the 90s. So exactly as we've discussed, our objective is as builders, we work in the service industry. Our job is to serve superior experiences for human beings. And the way that we practice that craft is through embodied offerings that are built with empathy, that are built to make things suck less and help you get to the destination of your journey that much faster.
I think that's what people want. And, for people who are also listening, so part of the listenership, they want to know about tech, but others want to know about entrepreneurship. And we didn't get a chance to talk about your role with Disco.xyz, but I want to kind of talk a little bit about, before we wrap up, what's your playbook for spotting and executing on opportunities in tech? Because people right now, the number one question I get asked all the time, day in and day out, is, if I learn about Web3, if I learn about blockchain, what's in it for me? What can I basically, how can I make money, right? How can I make money by understanding this technology? And I think someone with your experience can probably share a little bit about, how do you spot that golden opportunity?
So it is so hilarious that you say this. Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab a book that I can show your viewers here. In, I believe it was 1994. A lot of people had a very similar question. How do I make a fortune on the internet superhighway? Now, the reason that I
Wow.
laugh and grab that book is that it is actually featured in the Museum of Computer History, or Computer History Museum in Northern California. I recently saw it in the museum and thought it was so humorous that I found a used copy for a few dollars, but um, the sort of thesis of this book, how do I approach the frontier of technology and generate value for myself? That question has been around as long as there have been frontiers of technology. So what this ancient book written before search engines describes, and what guidance I would give to everyone today is, first, learn and satisfy the hunger of your mind. Then, once you understand the tools and the flows of value, how it works and why it's meaningful to you, then we can get into optimizing. But it's really difficult to walk into a new world blindfolded and understand how to, create a thriving ecosystem of value. So first, take off the blindfold, read a little, study up, understand where we are entering with a buddy, with a friend, of course, or a collaborator, colleague, or fellow builder, and then let's optimize. So, I think often people are drawn to this technology because they see immense opportunity for value. But that value is often captured by those who understand the systems best. Fortunately, it doesn't cost a thing for you to learn about this ecosystem and for you to become one of those advantaged and knowledgeable individuals.
I love that. And I think that's a word that people needed to hear today. Evan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. And before we close, I want to ask you finally, if you could get the world to understand one thing about digital identity, what would it be?
I would invite everyone to remember that privacy is just the absence of disclosure, and that your information is always most valuable to you. So when we talk about privacy, when we talk about consent, it's really a question of your power, your choice to disclose or not, and your choice to use the data written about you in service of what you're trying to do that day, or to just throw it out the window, as with any resource that we have. But one funny and unique thing about our data is that it is an infinite resource that we create. There's always more as long as we're alive. And so, in that way, we should feel capable and well resourced for the journey ahead because the new oil, the new water that is data, that comes from us.
I love that. So, data is an infinite resource. Your data is an infinite resource that you create. I think hearing those words, many people will be encouraged. Evin McMullen, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all the time we have, but big thanks to you for joining. If people want to learn more about Privado ID or Billions Network, where can they get information?
You can find me always on chain, on Twitter at Proven, or on X at Proven Authority. And to follow our work with billions.network, come visit us at billions.network or at billions_NTWK. And if you're interested in the underlying infrastructure of Privado ID, we are always on chain at privado.id and at Privado ID on X.
Wonderful. And we'll be adding those links to the show notes for people who want to follow up. Evin, thank you so much for your time today. And for everyone listening, we'll see you next time.